This is a quick lesson on APA style writing. Now, in all of your education classes, you'll be using APA style writing. So I want to go through this quick PowerPoint just to make sure that you understand a little bit better about how to do APA writing for your courses. And this was just taken from a professor at the Kent State University, as well as other information taken from Brenda Blackburn here at Blue Ridge. So why do we have to do APA style writing? Well, because learning to write means mastering an accepted and uniform writing style. And this is the type of writing style we in the education field always use. And then also because following this style makes your work easier to follow when read by people who are familiar with the APA style of writing. And all of your education writings, research, everything is written in APA style writing. So therefore, everyone who's going to be reading anything that you write for your education classes, they're all going to be much more familiar with APA. And then, of course, as we have stated before, APA is the most common writing style in education as well as other social sciences. So what's included in APA style writing? Well, basically everything in your paper. First of all, how your pages are even set up is determined by APA. How you cite your sources, how you put together your references, your reference page, and even the kind of language that you use within your paper. So most of this information is taken from the APA Manual of American Psychological Association. Of course, that's what APA stands for, American Psychological Association, the 6th edition. And so you can buy this manual if you would like. It is a very thick manual and it has lots of information in it. But for our courses here at Blue Ridge, you should have received an APA Pocket Guide purchased at the bookstore in your EDU 173 class. If you have not purchased that, you could go to the bookstore and get that. And it's just a small little pocket guide which might be helpful for you as you go through all of your education courses at Blue Ridge to just kind of refer back to in thinking about how to do APA writing in all of your courses. Various internet sites are available as well. This one here, you can go to that one. Make sure your resources, the sources you read are reputable. Not everything on the web is, so make sure you are using the ones that we are suggesting. This one and then the OWL English Purdue website as well. That's one of the most common ones and best website for APA formatting. So we're going to start at the end of your paper. We're going to start with the list of references. And a reference list is required if you cite any sources in your paper, and any kind of research paper, you should have sources. And then every source that is cited in your paper must appear on the reference list, and every entry in your reference list must be cited in your paper. So there shouldn't be any discrepancies. If it's in your paper, any citations, then it should be on your reference page. And then if you list it in your reference page, it should also be cited within your paper. Make sure you double space. The reference page is only double spaced if you're actually going to be publishing it. So for all of student papers, though, you are going to single space your references. You will double space between each reference, but within the reference itself, it should be single spaced, and we'll show you an example of that. Then you're going to have a typeset with a hanging indent of 0.5 inches. So your first line on your reference page will be with your margin, and then the second line of the reference is going to be indented 0.5 inches. And if you have a third line in that same reference, it will be indented as well. But when you start each reference, it will be lined up with your margin, and then any lines underneath that particular reference will be indented 0.5 inches. So here's an example. To cite a single authored book, you're going to have the last name, their initials, and then the date of publication, and notice there's a period there. Then the title of the book, Working with Gifted English Language Learners, and notice that those are italicized. Also notice that This is the only word that is capitalized, the first word of the title. And then if there's a proper noun, then you will capitalize it as well. There's a period after the title. Then you're going to use the publication place, which is Waco, Texas. You're going to use your colon, and then the actual publication, the publisher name right here. Okay, so there's no underlining for the actual title. You're going to italicize it all. Here's a revised edition of a book. You're going to use the editor's name here, and that's what the ED stands for, is editor. So last name, first initial, editor in parentheses, and the publication date, the period. Again, the title of the actual book is called Television, and you have the colon. And when you have a colon, then the next word is also going to be capitalized. So you have the first word that's capitalized, then you have the first word capitalized, then anything after a colon will be capitalized, but nothing else will be unless it's a proper noun. Then this is in the 5th edition, and so they write that in parentheses in a period. Then they have this. Now, notice this just says New York. Any cities that are very common for publishers to be coming from that particular city, like New York is very common, so is Boston or London, then you do not need to put the actual state afterwards. But if it's a city that's not so common, you would use the state as well. So New York is very common, then you have your colon, and then you have the publisher's name. Capitals in the title of the book are restricted to the first letter of the first word of the title, the first letter of any proper names, and the first letter of the first word after a semicolon, period, colon, or question mark. So here's a dual authored book. You have the author, and here's the other author. So you use the ampersand here between the names. You have the publication date. Then you have the title of the book. Again, it's a 5th edition. Boston, again, I said, is a very common city, so you don't need to put Massachusetts here. And then you have the publisher's name after that. So when listing authors, use the ampersand. In the reference list and in parenthetical citations in the text of your paper, not the word and. But do write out the word and in the text if you're referring to Davis and Rim. Okay, Davis and Rim, 2004 stated that, and then you finish your sentence. How about chapters in an edited book? So again, these two names here are the actual names of the chapter that you're referring to. And so you put their names, the publication date, the title of the chapter is not italicized. You just write out, and notice again, no capital letters except at the beginning. And then you say what book it's from, and it's in F.A. Carnes and K.R. Stevens, who are the editors of this large book. The title of the book is Achieving Excellence, Educating the Gifted and Talented, and you put the page numbers of the actual chapter that you're using. And then it's from Upper Saddle River, New Jersey. Notice they're putting New Jersey because Upper Saddle River is not a common publishing city. And then again, your publisher here at the end. Be sure to include the page numbers if you're just referencing one part of the book. Again, these two names here are the authors of that chapter of the book, and F.A. Carnes and K.R. Stevens are the editors of that book. This is the title of the actual book, whereas up here, this is the title of the chapter. How about a single authored article? And this is what you're going to use quite a bit in your EDU classes here at Blue Ridge. You'll be reading an article. You'll be reading an article or a journal article, and then you're going to summarize it for us. And so this is what you will use quite often. Sometimes it's a single authored article, sometimes it's more than one author for the article, but usually you're going to use articles. So here is the last name. You have his initials, 2006. Here is the title of the article, Gifted Students Dropping Out, New Evidence from a Talent Search Population. Notice where the capital letters are, here at the beginning and here after the colon. And then you have Roper Review, which is the actual title of the journal or the magazine that is being used. So Roper Review, that would be italicized because it's the title of the actual magazine or journal. 28, this again would be the, not the issue number, but this would be the volume number, okay? So the volume number of the journal, and then the pages that were used from this article. Okay, again, this is the volume number, and this is the title of the journal, whereas up here, this is the title of the article. If you have two or more authors for an article, again, here's how they are done. This is a hyphenated name, but they're just using the letters. And then these are his initials for Matthews, and Olszewski hyphenated name here for a last name, and then they aren't using the middle initial, just the first. And a lot of times you'll notice however they are using their names in the article where the authors are listed, that's how you're going to list their names here. And again, you usually list in alphabetical order the names of the authors. And then here is the title of the article. This is the actual title of the journal that the article came from, or the magazine the article came from. You have the volume number, and now here's another number right here. That is the issue number. So you have the volume number, and then right next to it, it is not italicized, the issue number, but the volume number is italicized. So notice the difference here. And then the page numbers that you found the article on. So you can find the volume number, 52, the page numbers, and the issue number here. Unpublished convention papers, you will probably not be using that, but here is how you would cite it in your reference page if you need to know that. So make sure you use this with caution. Remember, these are not published yet, so they have not been peer reviewed, and it's likely that it would not be the best type of reference to use. How about an internet article based on a print source? Well, what this means is it also is in print, but it's also found on the internet. And one of those examples would be Young Children Magazine from NAEYC, which you do use in EDU 173. You use articles from Young Children Magazine. So that particular magazine is found in print, but it's also found on the NAEYC website. If you are a member, you can get it off of the website from NAEYC as well. So this is how you would cite it if you're getting it off of the internet. So you would use the last names of the authors again, publication date, the title of the article, and then you're going to write in brackets electronic version, then the title of the actual journal, and then the volume number and the page numbers. Now be sure that you use the PDF version so it doesn't mess up your page numbers, and not the HTML version. You want to really try to use PDF anytime that you can. So if you're looking on NC Live or Psych articles, anything like that from the library resources, then you want to make sure you click on the PDF version rather than an HTML version to get the correct page numbers. How about an article in an internet-only journal? So this is a journal that is only on the internet. There is not a print source for it. And so here is how you would actually cite it. Again, the last name, publication date, and there you're going to go ahead and put in what the actual month and day is if you find it on the Internet Article Journal, the title of the article, and then the title of the journal, the magazine that you're using, and again it's italicized, the volume number. You're going to write retrieved and put the date of when you retrieved it. So retrieved November 20th, 2000 from, and then you put the actual URL right after that. This also would be the correct citation format for most other online sources that you use, whether it's a web page or something like that. So this is how you would try to cite those references as well. So what about interviews? Okay, so you need to make sure if you're interviewing somebody, whether it's in face-to-face, whether it's through an email or a phone conversation or whatever, when you're interviewing someone, you do need to reference them, but you will only reference them in your paper, but not on the reference page itself. So citing interviews, letters, emails, include the communicator's name, the fact that it was a personal communication, and the date of the communication, but do not include personal communication in the reference list on the reference page. But here's how you would do it in your actual paper. A.P. Smith also claimed that many of her students had difficulties with APA style. You can put it in parentheses, personal communication, and the date in which you had that communication. Or another way of citing it would be, many students in EDU 144 at Blue Ridge Community College had difficulties with APA style. B. Blackburn, Personal Communication, January 4th, 2010. So hang on, we're not done. Learning how to do the reference page is only beginning to APA style. So when do you cite your sources in your paper? First of all, when you're referring to an idea or concept you drew from something you read, you want to make sure you cite it. When you quote from something you read or heard, you definitely need to make sure you cite it. When you want to give the reader some other places to look for additional information, you need to cite it. So here's an idea. When you're paraphrasing, basically when you've read an article, then you're going to want to put it in your own words. That's called paraphrasing. You want to still cite the authors from that article because they're the ones you're paraphrasing. So you're going to say Scott, 1992 is publication date, identified that, and then say what you want to say. Or another way of saying it is several researchers, if you've read several articles and they say the same thing, then you can kind of clump them all together and say several researchers and then put their names and their publication dates. Remember, you're using their last names. Reported that, blah, blah, blah. Or you can actually put it at the end of a paraphrase sentence. So you can say what you want to say in a sentence and then put Scott 1992 at the end of the sentence. Now something I want you to think about is usually when you're writing in APA format and when you're paraphrasing from another journal or you're summarizing a journal that you've read, a journal article you've read, then the very first sentence is where you want to make sure you cite the authors. You don't want to start out or you don't want to use the words, the article said, whatever. Because really it's not the article that said it. It's really the authors that are saying it. So you want to cite their names. Like this, Scott 1992, identified that. Start the paragraph out with stating the actual author's names either like this or at the end of the sentence like this. And what you're going to do is then the rest of the paragraph, you do not need to cite their names unless you want to refer to their name because you've already cited them in the very first sentence. That way we will just assume the rest of the paragraph is from those authors. Now, when you start a new paragraph, that first sentence again needs to refer to the author's names. Okay, just like we did here or here, that very first sentence. Again, within that paragraph then, you do not need to put the publication date again because we're just assuming the rest of the paragraph is from that particular author and that particular publishing date. But if you change within the paragraph to a new author, then you need to cite that author. And then if you refer back to the first author, you'll have to cite him again. When you change the authors, then you'll need to cite them within the paragraph. Here's in citing a secondary source. Now, here's something very important to think about. If you are reading an article by Scott, but you want to, and Scott talks about a study by Brown, and you want to kind of introduce that or cite that in your paper, this is how you would do it here at the bottom of this slide. So you would say, in Brown's study, cited in Scott 1992, there was blah, 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 blah. So you read Scott, you read an article by Scott, and Scott referred to a study by Brown, and you want to actually refer to that in your paper. This is how it is done. Again, you read Scott, and Scott said something about Brown's study. So this is how you would cite it in your paper. So citing while paraphrasing or summarizing. You're going to list the last names of all the authors the first time you cite them, unless there are more than 5 authors of that particular journal article. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes there are lots of authors, and so we're going to cite them a little differently. If there are more than 5, or you are citing the paper of 3 or more authors for a second or more time, you're going to list the last name of the first author followed by et al. And the year of the publication. For instance, you would say Matthews et al. 2008. Again, that's if you have more than 5 authors, then you're going to always cite it like that. And then the second time or any time after if the article has more than 3 authors. The first time, you're going to cite all of them. Say if it has 3, 4, or 5 authors. You will, the first time you use their names, you'll cite all of those authors' names, their last names. But then every time after that, you would just put the first author's name, et al., and the publication date. So here's an example. Scott, Williamson, and Schaefer, 1990, reported that, and you're going to say that the first time, okay? And then every time after that, you would say Scott et al., 1990, reported that, whatever. Okay, if you have 2 authors, you're going to say Scott and Williamson, 1990, reported that, and you will use Scott and Williamson the first time and every time. So again, if there's 6 or more authors, though, you're going to use et al. The first time and every time. So it would be Scott et al. Every time if there's 6 or more authors of that article. What about quoting? You need to put the author's last names and the date, like you do when paraphrasing or when you're summarizing, but also the page numbers or paragraph numbers. A lot of times for online sources there are no page numbers, so you need to put the paragraph number. And so this, such as this author found that, quote, the research findings clearly indicate support for the hypothesis. Douglas, 2006, paragraph 5. Notice the period comes after the parentheses. That's for any time that you are using the parentheses, you need to put the period afterwards. Okay, so now our suggestion is that you do not need to quote, especially if you're summarizing an article. There's really no need to actually quote because you're just putting all of it in your own words, you're summarizing it, you're putting it down in your paper. But if there's some particular line or something that you just cannot say it another way and you have to use the exact words used in the article, then that's when you want to actually quote. And use the quotation marks, use the references, and use the either page number or paragraph numbers. So in general, keep quotations to a minimum, less than 3 per a long paper. Now that has to be a really long paper to use 3 quotes. Don't forget the quotation marks and page numbers or paragraph numbers if it's an online source, or you're going to be guilty of plagiarism, and we don't want that to happen. Now, if you're going to use a really long quote, and this is if you're using 20-page paper, you're writing a 20-page paper or so, and you're going to use a direct quote of 40 words or longer, Then you're going to set it in an indented block without quotation marks, but still followed by your citation information, the author's name, the publication date, and the page numbers or paragraph numbers. That's if you're using 40 words or more. Hopefully most of your papers you're going to do for EDU classes at Blue Ridge will not have any kind of quotes like that. How do you set up your paper in APA? Well, you're going to use an 8.5 by 11 white paper. That's kind of logical. With margins of 1 inch all the way around. So top, bottom, and sides are all 1 inch. You're going to double space everything in your paper. Your font should be Times or Times New Roman. 12 point is preferred, but 10 point may be used if necessary if you're making tables, for example. And then there's 1 space only between sentences. I don't know how many of you were like me when I learned how to type actually on a typewriter, and we would hit the space bar 2 times after a period or a punctuation mark. We would hit the space bar 2 times before we start the next sentence. Well, in APA, there's only 1 space. And I think most of us are at that point where we're used to that now, where we do a period, 1 space, and start our next sentence. So just remember that we do not have 2 spaces between sentences. Some other rules are that there's a title page. If you're using an actual formal research paper, you will have a title page. And it should contain the title of your paper, not a topic, but a title that reflects the content of the paper. It should have your name, the course name the paper is for, and the date you wrote it. Use headers and footers. In the header on the title page, you'll actually put something called running head, and then you'll have a shortened version of your title, Gifted Underachievement. Again, you actually type out the words running head with a colon and then a shortened title of your actual title of the paper. And you're also going to use page numbers in the right-hand corner of the header. So the running head is over on the left-hand corner of the actual header, and your page numbers are in the right-hand corner of the actual header. If you're using headings, this is just kind of shows you how to do headings. In a short paper like most we do in class, you're probably not going to use any other headings but first level headings. And so your first level heading would be right here in the center of the page. And then if you do other headings, it would be like this. But most of the time you're not going to do that. Don't use bold or underline text in headings. Look at your pocket guide or your textbook to see how to do this more. If you have references and tables or appendixes, and this is going to happen, let's say in your child case study, you would have most of these as well. And this is the order in which they would come. You would have your title page, you'll have your abstract, you'll have the actual body of the paper, you'll have your reference page, and then your appendixes. Any notes, like your observation notes or interviews or anything like that will go next. And then if you have any tables or figures, they would come last. So that's how that is going to be set up, especially for your child case studies that you will do for the EDU courses and any other formal papers that you would submit in APA format. Don't get tied up in knots. Consult your manual, and I'm also going to show you some other websites and show you some a very handy printout that you might use. Also ask your instructor if you're unsure of anything. Here's some other things that you might need to learn how to do. How do you cite an author whose name ends with junior? What about characteristics of tables, abbreviations, how to use which or that. Let's see what else here we want to know. If you do use abbreviations, please make sure you say what that actual abbreviation stands for at the beginning of your paper, and then you can use the abbreviation throughout the rest of your paper. For instance, SEM is the standard error of measurement, and then put it in parentheses, SEM, or structural equation modeling, SEM. So you're going to want to then, first at the beginning of your paper, state what the actual abbreviation is, and then from then on out in the paper, you can use the abbreviation. names with junior or the third, and notice how that's written there. Which versus that. Sometimes that's difficult to know. Do I use the word which or do I use the word that? When you use which, it's for non-restrictive clauses which are set off with commas. Notice the comma here, and that's why they use which. And use that for clauses that are restrictive, which means that they're essential to the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so that gives you a little bit about that particular PowerPoint. In most of your courses, in your EDU courses, you will find an actual section with APA resources. This particular handout here is a great handout that you just might want to keep with you, keep it available for you, but it goes through, and I use this quite often, I refer back to it all the time, but kind of goes through first the basic format of a paper, and it gives you throughout some different hints, direct quoting and how to do the direct quoting, and so it's got some great examples for you. Throughout this section is all about direct quoting. Again, here's some more, and it gives you some different hints. Again, this is what I'm talking about. If you have 40 or more words, will you use a block? Okay. And then underneath that, paraphrasing, using your own words to describe the author's ideas. And here's some examples of how to do that. For both quoting and paraphrasing, just another section about some different things there, how to refer to the author's names, just some examples of doing that. A reference page, and then here's all those examples of how to do the reference page, whether it's with a book or a journal article, internet source, whatever. So you might want to just really have this available, put it in a notebook, refer back to it as needed. This gives you the cities that are common cities, major cities well known for publishing. So these cities, you do not need to put the actual state. You just need to cite the city. And then rules with numbers. What about numbers? How do you write out the word 9 or do you put the actual number 9? So here's some great ideas on how you're to work with the numbers. Referring to persons with disabilities, how do you do that? Using abbreviations or acronyms, again, cite it first and then you can use the actual abbreviation later on. What about commas, colons, misuse of slashes, make sure we don't do that, hyphens and dashes. Here's what your actual title page would look like. Abstract, what it would look like, the body of the paper, and a reference page. Okay. Grammar and usage tips, just, different things like affect and affect. All right, just some great, how about there, and there? A lot of people get those really mixed up. So make sure you know how to use those. What about the numbers 2, 2, and 2? So here, this handout should be extremely helpful to you. You need to run it off, have it available for all your courses. There's an APA tutorial. You could, if you really want to listen to some more things about how to write APA, here's an APA PowerPoint that I just went over. There's a second one there if you want it. And then there should be an article summary example for you. And if we just open that up real quick, you'll see the title up here. And this is just for an article summary. So we're not using a title page because it's not a research paper. And we're talking about Grusok and Gounod, 1994, investigated the, and then you'll see how that's done. You'll see how an actual quote was used and the page number. Again, when you start a new paragraph, you'll need to use your author's names again, whether you use it with the parentheses here at the beginning of the first sentence, or if you use it like you do up here, where you're introducing it at the very beginning with the author's names. You can say, or research done by Grusok and Gounod investigated that, whatever, however you want to say it. And then your references are done like this. And you can just do that at the bottom of your article summary. You don't need to do a separate reference page when you're just doing an article summary. But if you're actually doing a research paper, you will need to have a separate reference page. So again, I hope those things are helpful for you and that you will be able to learn a great deal and continue to write in APA format for all of your EDU classes. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please consult your little pocket guide, consult this, consult the APA tutorial, the PowerPoints, and when all else fails, then contact your instructor and they will be happy to help you as well.